Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a controversial city council vote regarding a popular skating rink in Linda Vista.
It's the last skating rink in the city. We need to preserve it and save it for our community. We need to save it for this city.
A live report on the wind for Skateworld fans and what this means for the property the roller rink is on. Plus, Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen resigns. Addressing the media for the first time since this resignation, what she had to say about the commander-in-chief. And a new report shows climate change is now hurting bird populations. What's causing the negative effects? KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Monday, April 8th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The San Diego City Council has voted not to sell the property Skateworld San Diego is on. KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar joins us now from City Hall with the latest. Priya, what can you tell us about what happened today?
Well, Ebony, it was quite an emotional day. More than 40 people showed up here to give their public comment against the sale of the Skateworld property to Pacifica companies. The city of San Diego was required by state law to sell former redevelopment property assets like the Skateworld property. The city opened up a bidding process last year. Skateworld and other companies bid on the land, but ultimately that bid went to Pacifica Companies, which is a privately owned real estate firm. Now, Skateworld management and other community stakeholders believe the process was not transparent. Let's take a listen to what Skateworld management had to say earlier today.
We skate hundreds, literally thousands of people through our skating rink on a regular basis. This is fun and entertainment. It gets kids off the street. We're losing our identity if we just concentrate on replacing every family entertainment with a box store or some type of retail outlet. That we start looking at quality of life in the city, instead of just dollars and cents. We were right there in the bidding process. We were right there. Now give us what we were there for as far as the bidding process and make the community and happy. Make the city understand that quality of life is very, very important.
And that was Skateworld management right there, but dozens of neighbors in the Linda Vista community also came out and talked about how integral the skating rink is in their neighborhood.
And Priya, was the vote unanimous by the City Council?
So, Ebony, it was actually pretty interesting. Council member Scott Sherman from District 7, he actually represents Linda Vista, which is where the Skateworld skating rink is located. He introduced a motion to accept the city staff's recommendation to sell the Skateworld property to Pacifica. Now, that motion obviously got voted down. So then council members Chris Ward and Georgette Gomez introduced a motion to not sell the property and reopen the bidding process. Now, that motion did pass unanimously. Needless to say, the dozens of people who came out here to talk about how they did not want that Skateworld property to be sold, they were certainly celebrating after that unanimous vote. Reporting from City Hall, Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
Thanks, Priya. Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen speaks publicly for the first time since resigning from her position in the Trump administration. Trump announced on Sunday in a tweet that Nielsen would be leaving her post. This came just days after Nielsen and Trump both traveled to Calexico for a border security roundtable. Despite reports of differences between Nielsen and Trump over the handling of Central American migrants, Nielsen said she still stands behind the president.
I just want to thank the president again for the tremendous opportunity to serve this country. I'm forever grateful and proud of the men and women of DHS who work so hard every day to execute their missions and to protect the homeland. I really look forward to continuing to support them from the outside. I've spent the last 24 hours since yesterday talking with government officials, administration officials, members of Congress to ensure a smooth transition. As you know, DHS has a vast array of missions. I want to make sure that we continue to execute them all with excellence through the transition. I share the president's goal of securing the border. I will continue to support all efforts to address the humanitarian and security crisis on the border.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin McAleenan is taking over as the acting head of Homeland Security. Meanwhile, a U.S. judge temporarily blocks the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico policy. Under the policy, most asylum seekers attempting to cross the southern border are required to wait in Mexico while their cases go through the courts. Today, the San Francisco judge ruled the policy should be suspended while a civil liberties lawsuit moves forward. But the block will not take effect immediately. The judge placed his decision on hold until Friday to give U.S. officials a chance to appeal. When police officers are permitted to use deadly force could be changing. Lawmakers joined civil rights activists today to push for a measure they say will prevent unnecessary police shootings in California. Under the proposed bill, officers could only use deadly force when there's no other safe alternative to prevent harm to themselves or others. One local assembly member says lethal force should always be the last resort.
That you never use lethal force unless you have to. There are other means and methods that can be used because you respect life.
Police organizations statewide are opposing the legislation. Critics say enforcement decisions must be made by people who are trained to handle split-second life and death situations, not by civilian lawmakers in Sacramento. The bill heads for a key vote tomorrow morning in the Assembly Public Safety Committee. Also at the state capitol, a new bill could help keep students in school if they find themselves in financial crisis. The measure introduced today would clear the way for California community colleges to issue emergency financial aid. This would come in the form of small grants throughout the semester for students who have come across unforeseen financial challenges. Lawmakers say the program would help keep low-income students on track to graduate, so they're not forced to work more hours in order to cover emergency costs.
What we have found is that our current financial aid programs have not been enough to keep students in school. It's typically one financial emergency that can end up spiraling a student out of their education, whether it be their car breaks down, they lose a job, they get evicted from their home.
The measure allows each community college campus to use up to $25,000 for their emergency financial aid program. New research finds that climate change is putting stress on wetlands in the Great Basin, and that's hurting bird populations. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson shows us what's causing the decline.
Changing water conditions linked to climate change are impacting the wetland habitats that Great Basin water birds rely on. The basin includes most of Nevada and parts of Utah, Arizona, Oregon, and the eastern edge of California. The changing climate affects all sorts of migrating water birds, including white pelicans, American avocets, and killdeer. Susan Haig is a former United States Geological Survey researcher. In a paper she co-authored in Scientific Review, she found the average temperatures in the Great Basin states climbed over the past 20 years, and rainfall totals fell during the same period.
We did find that there was a significant correlation with climate variables and what's happening with the bird populations. But that's not to say that urbanization and other uses of water have not severely affected birds in the Great Basin and elsewhere.
Haig says western snowmelt is arriving too early and not sticking around long enough. She says that affects birds that rely on wetlands for breeding. Findings are published in the journal Scientific Reports. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Climate change isn't just affecting birds. A new study finds global warming is melting Earth's glaciers faster than scientists had thought. They are losing 369 billion tons of snow and ice each year, more than half of that in North America. In today's KPBS Climate Change Report, we explain why.
The world's glaciers are shrinking 5 times faster now than in the 1960s, and the loss is accelerating. That's according to a new study published today in the journal Nature. The most comprehensive measurement of glaciers worldwide found that thousands of inland masses of snow compressed into ice are shrinking about 18% more than calculated back in 2013. Lead author Michael Zemp, director of the World Glacier Monitoring Service at the University of Zurich, says the ice melt is huge.
What we found is that glaciers lost a lot of ice. Since 1961, glaciers lost more than 9,000 billion tons of ice. Well, that's a big number. I converted that, and this is an ice cube of the size of Germany with a thickness of 30 meters. Or it's an ice cube of the size of the United States of America with the size of 4 feet. So it's a tremendous amount of ice and fresh water that we actually lost, and that adds to global sea level rise.
The glaciers shrinking fastest are in Central Europe, Western Canada, the U.S. lower 48 states, New Zealand, and near the tropics. Glaciers in these places, on average, are losing more than 1% of their mass each year. Zemp's team used ground and satellite data to look at the loss in 19,000 glaciers, 38 times more than in previous studies. They determined Southwestern Asia is the only region where glaciers are not shrinking, which Zemp says is due to localized climate conditions. The study found glaciers are shrinking in 18 other regions, led by Alaska, where glaciers have been losing 80 billion tons of snow and ice a year since 2006. Zemp says even if carbon emissions were to stop immediately, glaciers would continue to melt.
So even if we would stop emissions now, glaciers would continue to lose mass because they were not yet able to react to the past climate change. So even if you fix the problem today, glaciers would continue for the next 10, 20, maybe 30 years to melt and to contribute to global sea level rise.
Zemp says the biggest cause is still expansion of warming water, but the new figures show glacier melt is responsible for 25 to 30% of the yearly rise in oceans, which is about 1/7 of an inch.
You see that glaciers are the second largest contributor, making about 25 to 30% of current sea level rise. The biggest one is the warming of the ocean, thermal expansion, and then followed by the two ice sheets. The ice sheet in Greenland, about in the order of magnitude of the glaciers, 1/4, and a little bit comes also from the Antarctic ice sheet that just started to melt, contributing about 10% to the observed sea level rise.
Zemp's colleague Ben Marzion from the University of Bremen, Germany, who also worked on the study, says man's influence on melting glaciers is clear.
At the beginning of the 20th century, glaciers retreated because the Little Ice Age ended, and no human interference was necessary for that. But then we can see throughout the 20th century, the anthropogenic influence is growing. As people started to emit more and more CO2, the atmosphere was warming and warming, and that meant that the glaciers kept melting. So now the glaciers are melting not because of natural causes, but mostly because of anthropogenic causes. The warmest years we have on record all are in the 21st century and even after 2010. The same with sea level rise. We see that sea level rise is accelerating, and because of that it makes sense that we see more and more of those records.
According to the study, the world has lost 10.6 trillion tons of ice and snow since 1961.
I'm Judy Woodruff tonight on the NewsHour with Kirsten Nielsen out as Secretary of Homeland Security. What's next for U.S. immigration policy? Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
He's one of the lost boys of Sudan. Thousands of young boys who were orphaned or displaced due to a civil war that killed millions of people. Alphonsion Dang eventually settled in San Diego's City Heights neighborhood. He has written a book about that experience, and he joins us now with his co-author and mentor, Judy A. Bernstein. Disturbed in Their Nest, it describes your experience when you moved to San Diego and settled in City Heights. Can you talk to me about your early days in the City Heights community?
Everything was quite like what I expected in the refugee camp before coming here. The immigration program told us about things to expect. Things like going to school, getting a job. But when I arrived, it felt like another jungle for me.
What was your objective in writing this latest book and in the previous book?
I didn't have to convince them to tell their story. The first day I met them, the thing they wanted to get in Walmart were composition books. And so they started writing and giving me the writing. They wanted me to help them with their English. And when I saw the stories, they were just, they were about what had happened to them in Africa, and some of them were about little experiences here as well, but mostly about for 15 years they'd been fleeing the war and been in a refugee camp. So these were stories I couldn't even imagine. And at the time, the war was still going on. So their families were, suffering in silence. It was a couple of years later, I was like, you guys have written all this beautiful stuff, and I think the world needs to hear it. There's a purpose for these stories.
And you said that Alphonse Dion and his brother and cousin were already writing about their experience, but do you feel that sharing it in this way has been in any way therapeutic?
I don't know if I would say it's it depends what therapy is. But I think it's meaningful to be able to. Judy was the one that encouraged us to tell their story. Where I come from, stories, were a part of my life, and but they were like passed down orally. It was never in this modern day form of storytelling, where you got to put your story into a book. And because of her skills as a writer and an understanding of where we came from, and she was sensitive to the nature of our story, that gave us the courage. I mean, at least it gave me the courage to be able to tell it.
And what do you think people can learn from reading this latest book?
I think they can learn what I learned. We see ourselves as being the norm, and until we're exposed to other people and other cultures and see their values, our perspectives can remain narrow. And so knowing them and seeing America through their eyes broadened my perspective so much. And that's just a really important thing, that we need more of that in this world.
And this weekend, you are both taking part in the first ever San Diego Writers Festival.
Yes.
Can you talk about what you'll be doing there as far as the panel?
Well, actually, Alphonse Dion's going to be on the panel. This is San Diego's first ever Writers Festival. It's at the Central Library from 10 till late in the evening. And they've got some great authors there, a lot of them. Piper Kerman from Orange is the New Black is the keynote speaker. Alphonse Dion will be on a panel at 1 o'clock about immigrant stories. So I hope everybody comes. It's for writers and readers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I hope you had a great day today. Our weather is really just beautiful. We're seeing our temperatures in the 70s, lots of sunshine, not much going on here. Taking a look at our satellite and radar, a couple of clouds and spots, but mostly just sunny, bright conditions throughout today. Now, to the north of us, there is a storm coming in off the Pacific. There's kind of a train of moisture here. That's bringing Northern California showers, heavier downpours at times. Not going to have an impact on us until later on in the week. There is a chance of seeing some showers popping up from one of those northern storms kind of creeping on down into our territory. So for tonight, expect to see partly cloudy skies, a temperature of 61 in the metro, Oceanside at 54, Ramona around 50 degrees, and Mount Laguna 50 for that low temperature. Here we are Tuesday, kind of a big dip in the jet stream here, and that's going to push down some cooler air and also some of that rain, some of that snow. It's going to be pushing into Southern California. But notice where we are. Well, it's not really going to have an impact on us. We're still going to look pretty good here on Tuesday with sunshine and warmer temperatures. So 70 degrees in San Diego, El Cajon at 76, and Ramona 74 degrees. Borrego Springs, expect to see that sunshine, a temperature of 89. Now, here's what I was talking about for late week. We're talking Thursday night into Friday. There is a chance we will see some of those showers, frequent showers popping up in Southern California. There's kind of two options here. This low could either drive to the east. If that happens, we're not going to see this, but there's a better chance that it is going to dive to the south. And if that does happen, well, then we might need to use those umbrellas on Friday. Taking a look at the extended forecast, we'll see sunshine through Thursday, jumping up to those low 70s. And then on Friday, a spotty shower is possible, but drier by Saturday. Inland, we'll see that sunshine getting warm. Look at Thursday, up to 77 degrees. Looks beautiful. Showers Friday, drier by the weekend. In the deserts, expect to see a shower or two, but also some sunshine on Friday. And in the mountains, a brief shower is possible by Friday. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra.
It's a monthly book discussion with a science-based twist. KPBS's new podcast called Device explores novels that use science to drive a story's action and dissects the scientific plausibility. KPBS midday host Jade Hyman chats with the woman behind the new season.
Emily, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So explain to me, what is a plot device?
A plot device is something that the author puts into a novel to drive the action of the plot, to move his or her characters forward. And sometimes it really works, and sometimes it makes you laugh.
Can you give me an example of a scientific plot device that was just outrageous?
I think a lot of people are familiar with both the film and the book The Martian. And the thing that actually strands the astronaut on Mars could never happen on Mars. Like, the winds are simply just not strong enough. And that's kind of a well picked apart aspect of that book. And that book is famous, though, because the rest of the book is heavily researched and does a very good job of actually explaining science.
Are there any types of novels that typically bend scientific truth for dramatic effect?
Science fiction as a general rule, which I love. Science fiction is my favorite genre of fiction, but I don't really tackle, with one exception. We do tackle one Philip K. Dick book in the series, Time Out of Joint, but for the most part in this series, I've avoided science fiction because, like, we can't do time travel. We can't pick that apart. We can't pick apart, super speed throughout space, like warp drives, like all of that stuff is a little silly, but it's fun, and it's okay that it's silly. It's okay, but that's not the point of this podcast.
All right, so maybe crime novels.
Yeah, with a lot of the forensics, like how I think very famously a lot of forensic television shows will have like focus in on a picture, and they're like, okay, enhance that picture. Like, no, picture has a limited amount of pixels. You can only enhance it so far, and that's definitely something that science fiction and like crime novels will do pretty frequently.
And can you explain to me how these plot devices shape the public's perception of science?
Well, in some cases they can cause fear. So in the case of the book Jaws by Peter Benchley, which is a book that we tackle in the series, as well as the Poisonwood Bible, which is another book that we tackle, both of those novels have exaggerated how certain animals behave. With Jaws, the shark, obviously, and with the Poisonwood Bible, there's a horde of ants. And both of these novels have animals behaving in ways that they would never behave in real life, and it creates this fear. And when you have fear, that's really, really hard for the public to understand why conservation matters, like why shark conservation matters, why insect conservation matters, because they're gross, they're icky, but they're important, and it's really important that we appreciate that.
Emily T. Griffiths, host of KPBS new podcast Device, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You can check out Device episodes on Apple's iTunes, Google Play, and kpbs.org. Now for a look at tonight's top stories. A big win for skating fans in San Diego. Today, City Council members voted not to sell the property Skateland sits on. Skateland is the last skating rink in the city of San Diego. Plus, lawmakers joined civil rights activists today for a push for a measure they say will prevent unnecessary police shootings in California. Under the proposed bill, officers could only use deadly force when there's no other safe alternative to prevent harm to themselves or others. And a new bill could help keep students in school if they find themselves in financial crisis. The measure introduced today would clear the way for California community colleges to issue emergency financial aid. This would come in the form of small grants throughout the semester for students with financial challenges. Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Coming up on Morning Edition, we take a look at Islamophobia in America. And on Midday Edition, a phone application helping get street repairs done in the city, how it works. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.